After this, I'm going to ask two brothers if they would assist in collecting this morning's offering. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 through 12. Proverbios capítulo 3, versículo 1 al 12. Por favor, todos sígueme. Everyone, please follow along. My son, don't forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commands, for they will bring you many days of full life and well-being. Never let loyalty and faithfulness leave you. Tie them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will find favor and high regard with God and people. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not rely on your own understanding. In all your ways, know him, and he will make your paths straight. Don't be wise in your own eyes, and fear the Lord and turn away from evil. This will be healing for your body and strengthening for your bones. Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first produce of your entire harvest. Then your barns will be completely filled, and your vats will overflow with new wine. Do not despise the Lord's instruction, my son, and do not loathe his discipline, for the Lord disciplines the one he loves, just as the Father disciplines the Son, of whom he delights. Se encuentran hermanos en el MBC. Voy a pedir a los hermanos si nos ayudan a recoger la ofrenda de esta mañana. I'm going to ask the brethren if they would assist in collecting this morning's offering.
Hermanos, hoy vamos a continuar en Jueces capítulo 19. Today we're going to go to Judges chapter 19. Jueces capítulo 19. Pero antes vamos a cantar Feliz Cumpleaños. Before that, we're going to sing Happy Birthday. Amen. To Sister Ofelia, nuestra hermana Ofelia.
Amen.
Que está más joven hoy. She's younger today. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, God bless you. Happy birthday to you. Cumpleaños feliz, cumpleaños feliz. Que el Señor te bendiga. Que los cumplas feliz. Y muchos más. This is the birthday song. It is happy birthday.
Thank you.
That's just to get it out of the way. Esa canción es pues para quitarlo el camino. Vamos a Jueces capítulo 19. Empezando en el verso 1, let's go to Judges 19, beginning at verse 1. I just want to point out, this is, we're going to hear some things that might sound similar to the story before, but I want to clarify that it's not the same person that we're going to be reading about in chapter 19. Vamos a leer algo en el capítulo 19 que se parece a la historia anterior, pero quiero anotar que no es la misma persona, no es la misma historia. Es una persona diferente, it's a different person, it's a Levite, es un levita, que tal vez es un sacerdote, and maybe he's also a priest, but in this whole chapter we are learning. We've been learning about the state where Israel was far from God. Hemos estado aprendiendo el estado donde estaba Israel, lejos de Dios. Y cómo ellos se han estado apartando de Dios, how they have been setting themselves apart from the will of God. The more choices they made, the farther they got from God. Entre más decisiones tomaban, más lejos se estaban apartando de el Señor. Hermanos, esto es fácil. This is easy to happen. We can invite that into our life without even acknowledging it. Podemos invitar ciertas cosas a tomar ciertas decisiones que nos van a apartar de Dios. Muchas veces parecen decisiones inocentes. Many times they might seem as innocent choices. But many times those innocent choices can draw you farther from God. Muchas decisiones te pueden alejar más de Dios. Por ejemplo, hoy en día, hermanos, nowadays, some young people, some young teenagers, jóvenes, toman la decisión de involucrarse en deportes. They make the choice of getting involved in sports, which necessarily sports is not a bad thing. A veces los deportes no son una cosa mala, pero muchas veces los deportes se meten en el camino de las cosas de Dios. Many times sports get in the way, right, in the Lord's way. And it seems innocent at first, se parece algo inocente, pero al final de cuentas termina siendo algo más serio. At the end of the matter, everything becomes farther. It becomes more serious. You start going to practice, not church. Empiezas a ir a la práctica, no a la iglesia. Estudios bíblicos, Bible studies. And same thing happens sometimes with adults. Lo mismo pasa con los adultos. Cosas muy similares que poquito a poquito nos apartan de Dios. Little by little, they get us farther from God. Well, it's not that bad. Quizás puede decir, no es tan malo. Hermanos, Israel así estaba. Israel was that way, but they made some more serious choices. At the end, empezaron a tomar decisiones más serias, donde realmente no estaban contentos con las bendiciones de Dios, con lo que Dios les proveyó, and they weren't really content with what God had provided. But we learned they wanted more than what God had provided. Aprendimos que querían más de lo que Dios ya proveyó. Y empezaron a mezclar la adoración a Dios, que quiere decir adulteraron espiritualmente. They began to not just worship God, but worship false gods, which is spiritual adultery. And so this is where they were. They were adulterous spiritually. Y ahí es donde llegaron. Se convirtieron en adúlteros espiritualmente, donde estaban mezclando adoración a Dios y a dioses falsos. So where they're mixing their worship towards God, they were rendering their lives, their petitions to something else other than God. Le estaban sometiendo sus peticiones. Su confianza estaba en algo más, no simplemente en Dios. Nosotros no estamos exentos de estas cosas, hermanos. We are not exempt from that. That can happen to us. Esto nos puede suceder a nosotros si no tenemos el cuidado. We are not careful. Right? We are susceptible. Somos susceptibles a estas cosas si no ponemos guardia. We don't keep guard. Right? We think we can be strong. When si pensamos que no podemos caer en eso, pues estamos en problemas. So entremos al verso 1. Let's get into verse 1. En aquellos días, cuando no había rey en Israel, hubo un levita que moraba como un forastero en la parte más remota del monte de Efraín, el cual había tomado para sí mujer concubina de Belén de Judá. And it came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite sojourning on the side of Mount Ephraim, who took to him a concubine of Bethlehem, Judah. Let's bow our heads. I'm going to try to go through the whole chapter. Voy a tratar de predicar este capítulo si es posible, si no voy a parar. If it seems too long, I'm going to stop. But let's bow our heads. Vamos a inclinar nuestros rostros. Bendito Padre Celestial, gracias por esta hermosa mañana. Thank you for the beautiful morning. Thank you, Lord, for the wonderful lessons. Gracias por las excelentes lecciones que enseñamos en esta mañana. Ayúdanos a llevarlas en nuestras casas. Help us to take that to our homes and apply it in our lives. Aplicarlas en nuestras vidas. Otra vez, Señor, bendice cada aspecto. Bless every part or aspect of the service. Lord, I ask you to please help me to bring forth the preaching and teaching of your word. Ayúdame a presentar la predicación y la enseñanza de tu palabra, Padre Celestial. Ayúdame a ser tu instrumento. Help me to be an instrument. Don't let anything or anybody distract us. No hagas que nada ni nadie nos distraiga, Padre Celestial. Bendice a nuestro hermano Ofelia, los que cumplen años en este mes, con muchos más años llenos de bendiciones, salud y tu paz y tu gozo, Padre Celestial. Gracias y te suplicamos todo esto en el más precioso nombre de tu Hijo amado Cristo Jesús. Amén. Amén. So aquí estamos leyendo sobre otro levita. Here we read about a Levite, which it doesn't specify he was a priest, no especifica que era un sacerdote, pero quizás si era, it's a probability that he was also a priest. Even if he wasn't a priest, right, he was of the tribe of Levi. Aunque no era sacerdote, si era de la tribu de Leví, que era una tribu muy especial. Y la palabra de Dios aquí nos da un detalle que podemos poner atención. We can pay attention to this because it says, and it came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel. Dice, en aquellos días cuando no había rey en Israel. Esto lo podemos espiritualizar. We can try to spiritualize this, but this can only mean, or it might just be telling us that it's the days where Israel still didn't have a king. Esto simplemente puede indicarnos el tiempo de que está hablando el que escribió estos versos, que en los tiempos donde Israel todavía no tenía rey. Y si lo espiritualizamos, if we spiritualize this verse, it can just mean where Israel was spiritually, they had no king. Vamos a agregar que espiritualmente, si no había, podemos decir, si en esos días Israel no tenía un rey, espiritualmente no tenía un rey, no tenían alguien que gobernara sobre ellos. They didn't have someone to govern over them. Although in those days, even though there was no king, aunque en esos días no había rey, Dios sí tenía sus levitas y podemos decir era el tiempo de los jueces. God didn't have Levites, he had priests, right? And we can also say this was the time of the judges. It doesn't say there was no judge, maybe there was. No dice que no había juez, quizás sí había juez. Pero aunque no hubiera juez, los levitas estaban. Y el tabernáculo existía. Whether there was no judge or there was a judge, there was Levites. The tabernacle was there. The place to worship God was there. El lugar donde adorar a Dios estaba ahí. Y digo esto, hermanos, I'm saying this because if there was Levites, there was a way that that was the way that God could rule over Israel. Si había levitas, sacerdotes, it was high Levite priests. That was the way that God could govern or reign over Israel. Si había levitas o sacerdotes, esa era la forma donde Dios iba a poder gobernar sobre el pueblo. Cuando pensamos en los sacerdotes, when we think about the priests, we usually just think about their sacrifices. Simplemente pensamos en los sacrificios que ellos hacían, the sacrifices they would perform. But they would do more than just that. Right? They would minister to the people. Ellos hacían más que sacrificios. Ellos administraban a los hermanos. Ellos procuraban que el pueblo esté guardando la ley. They had to make sure that the people were keeping the law. Right? If there was accusations of adultery, fornication, or any sort of sin, they would call the priest. Si había acusaciones de fornicación o adulterio o cualquier otro pecado de robo, ellos tenían que ir a los levitas. O los levitas eran como jueces, they were judges. They were like counselors, consejeros, y también aplicaban la ley. They would apply the law. So it's just more than sacrifices. Era más que sacrificios. Era la forma de gobierno, o que Dios había, era algo que podemos decir que era lo que Dios usaba para gobernar su pueblo. We can say this is what God would use to govern over his people and also to have a relationship with his people. Era lo que Dios usaba para tener una relación con su pueblo. So volvamos a este levita. Let's go back to this Levite. The main point was that whether Israel had a king or not, God was still available if they wanted him as king. Aunque no haya rey o juez, Dios les dio la posibilidad para que él pueda gobernar o ser rey sobre ellos. So aquí no había rey, there was no king. And then here we read about Levi. Vemos sobre un levita. ¿Y qué es este levita? Algo que quizás se ve extraño. Something that might seem strange to you or me. Right? He doesn't really tell us where this Levite is from. No dice de dónde es este levita, porque recuerden, los levitas tenían tierras designadas en diferentes grupos. Remember that Levites had designated cities. And they also had designated cities from, each family. So there was different groups of Levites that, belong or that were supposed to be in certain areas. Había diferentes grupos de levitas. Y estaban divididos. Algunos levitas tenían que vivir en ciertas ciudades. Some of the Levites were supposed to be in certain cities. Like the Levite we read about before, the priest, el levita que leímos anteriormente. Se dice que era de la parte de la tribu de, creo que Judá. I think he was part of the tribe of Judah. I forgot what tribe. But we know the other priest was not in the area he was designated to be. El otro sacerdote que leímos, él no estaba en la área que se le había designado a él. Pero este levita no sabemos de dónde viene. No dice si era de Judá o de otro. We don't know if he was from Judah or any of those things. He just says a Levite. Nomás hicieron levita, pero este levita se casó con una mujer de Bethlehem, Judá. He married, he gets a concubine from Bethlehem, Judah. Él recibe una concubina de Belén, de Judá. So no podemos concluir lo mismo, pero we cannot arrive to the same conclusion that he was out of place. Maybe he was in his area, the area he belonged to. Quizás este sí estaba en el área que le pertenecía a él. Pero algo sucede aquí, algo que parece extraño. La mayoría de nuestras mentes is something we read about something strange that it's we usually view it as something strange that a Levite gets a concubine, que una levita agarra una concubina. El imagen de una concubina muchas veces ha sido destronado. The view of a concubine has been distorted or misunderstood, se ha malentendido. Pero realmente, hermanos, una concubina era una esposa. It was like a wife. But for some reason, they were considered like a lesser wife. Muchas veces las consideraban como una esposa menor. No está hablando de, it's not speaking about age. He's just talking about, for some reason, we read about Abraham, hablamos de Abraham, de David, they had their wife, tenían su esposa, pero tenían concubinas, but they also had concubines. Usually the concubines came with somebody that had more than one wife. Cuando las concubinas venían es porque tenían más que una esposa. Pero aquí no dice que este levita tenía otra esposa, but here the scriptures do not record he had another wife. He only had one, nomás tenía una. Pero podemos ver a la concubina como una mujer, una esposa menor. We can say she was a lesser wife. That's the only way I can, understand this word. La única manera. Porque si no lo ponemos de esa manera, hermanos, vamos a crear una imagen que realmente la Escritura no nos da. Because if we don't view it that way, we're going to create an image that really the Bible doesn't give us. Right? But I was reading the laws about marriage, especially when it came to the Levites. Leí leyes sobre el matrimonio en el libro Levítico, in the book of Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Deuteronomio. Y no hay una ley que diga que los levitas no podían tener una concubina. Una concubina no es una mujer que no podemos decir que no estaban casados o no era un tipo de matrimonio. We cannot conclude that there was not some form of marriage when it came to concubines. There's not a law that prohibited the Levite to marry or to be with or have a concubine. With is just a different way of saying or lesser wife, which is a strange way of viewing it. Es una manera extraña de verlo. Una concubina es una esposa menor, no de edad, pero podemos decir de rango. Pero aquí miramos este tema medio complicado. We see this sort of complicated verse or position of this Levite, este levita. So el hombre está juntado, vamos a decir, con esta concubina. He's with this, he's with this concubine. And then in verse 2, what happens? ¿Qué sucede en el verso 2? Dice, y su concubina le fue fiel, and his concubine played the whore against him. Lo engañó. Se portó con una, ¿cómo decir? Una ramera. Lo engañó. She behaved as a whore. She cheated on him. And we don't know exactly what happened in this whole thing. No sabemos exactamente los detalles de qué sucedió. Pero lo que sí sabemos que cualquier cosa que haya sucedido en este proceso, we don't know exactly what happened, but whatever happened in that time, the woman leaves, right? La mujer se va a la casa de su padre. She goes to her father's house, to Bethlehem, Judah. Se va a Belén, Judá. ¿Por qué? Por 4 meses, for 4 months. For the period of 4 months, she is not what the man we can call her husband. Se va por 4 meses por el hombre que podemos decir que era su esposo. El verso 3 nos aclara esto. Verse 3 makes these things clear. So in verse 3 also there we see that he was a husband and she was a former wife. En el verso 3 entendemos que ella sí era un marido y ella era una forma de esposa. No lo podemos entender claro la palabra. We cannot understand the word clearly. There's a Hebrew word for concubine, una palabra hebrea para concubina. Pero dice, se va por 4 meses. She leaves for 4 months. Right, this is not a beautiful picture or something that we can say, wow, it's a good thing that's going on. No es algo que podemos decir, es algo bueno que está sucediendo. La separación en cualquier matrimonio, hermanos, es una de las cosas más terribles, horribles que podemos ver. Separation when it comes to marriage. This is not divorce yet. This is just a separation, a process of divorce. It's not a beautiful thing to see. It's one of the most terrible, horrible things we can see or even experience o experimentar. No es algo que queremos ver. It's not something that we want to see. It's not something that we want to see somebody go through. El divorcio no es algo que nosotros debemos de querer ver. Es algo que debemos de no querer. It's something that we shouldn't desire to see. It's something that we should try to avoid happening in our lives. Es algo que debemos evitar en nuestras vidas. Y es algo que debemos evitar o no querer ver. Something that we shouldn't desire to see. It's not a good picture. No es un retrato bonito. Si es lo que vemos aquí, it's what we see. You know, I think about families. Yo pienso en familias y lo que las familias pasan, o los padres pasan. I think about parents, what they feel and what they go through, lo que ellos sienten y lo que les pasa a ellos cuando sus hijos se tienen que divorciar o se divorcian, when their children have to or go through a divorce. It's not an easy or beautiful experience. No es una experiencia fácil o hermosa. Es algo intolerable, no intolerable, pero es algo que lastima. Something that hurts. And here we see, you know, a Levite. And as we read the story, mientras leemos esta historia, parecía que en este levita, hermanos, podemos ver que había poquita esperanza para Israel. In this Levite, we can see there was a little bit of hope for Israel. There was a little bit of light. Había un poquito de luz. Este levita parecía que sí era un buen hombre. It seems as if he was a good man. A man that loved his wife, un hombre que amaba a su esposa, pero su esposa decidió ser infiel. But his wife decided to be unfaithful. And then she leaves him, y luego lo deja. Y 4 meses, él ya quizás no aguantó, maybe 4 months, or maybe it took him 4 months to figure out where she was. We don't really know. Quizás duró 4 meses para darse cuenta de lo que, de dónde estaba ella, o ya no aguantó. Maybe he wasn't able to, you know, put up with it no more. So he goes looking for her. Va y la busca en el verso 3. Vamos a ver, y se levantó su marido y la siguió para hablarle amorosamente y hacerle volver. And her husband arose and went after her to speak friendly unto her. The English doesn't do a fair translation to me. Aquí en inglés no lo hace muy justo. La palabra que usa para amigable, the word that is used in English for friendly, really means she went to speak to her heart. Fue para hablarle al corazón de la mujer. Fue a hablarle y convencer el corazón de ella. He went to win her heart, right? To talk to her heart. Have a heart-to-heart conversation with her. Tener una conversación. Yo simplemente me puedo imaginar la conversación. I can only imagine the sort of conversation that he had. What would a husband that loves his wife tell a wife that just cheated on him and he still wants her back? ¿Qué es lo que un esposo le diría a su esposa que lo acaba de engañar, pero él ama tanto que quiere que ella vuelva con él? Nomás nos podemos imaginar. We can only imagine what this husband would say. But he went to speak to her heart. Fue a hablarle a su corazón. Quería convencerla, lo fue a convencerla que vuelva con él. She went to try to convince her to return. We don't see that she gives an answer. No miramos que ella da una respuesta. No miramos que responde ella, pero sabemos que quizás su respuesta was, we know that her answer was probably yes, because she does end up going with it. Porque ella sí se devuelve con él. Sí se devuelve. Y se levantó su marido y la siguió para verle, hablarle a su corazón amorosamente y hacerla volver. Y lleva consigo un criado y un par de asnos, y ella le hizo entrar en la casa de su padre. And her husband arose and went after her to speak friendly unto her, or to her heart, and to bring her again, having a servant with him, and a couple of donkeys, and she brought him into her father's house. And when the father of the damsel saw him, she rejoiced to meet him. So here we see a nice picture, right, for the father. Miramos un retrato medio amable. Un esposo queriendo restaurar su matrimonio. A husband trying to restore his marriage, in the process of getting back together with the wife that left him, en el proceso de rejuntarse. Y tenemos que entender, no estaban divorciados, they were not divorced, but they had just separated, nomás se separaron. So él va, la esposa, la mujer lo recibe, the wife receives him, and she brings him to her father's house. Lo trae a la casa del padre. ¿Qué es el padre? What does the father do? Right, this lets us know that the father-in-law loved this man. Aquí podemos entender que el suegro o el padre de la mujer amaba a este hombre. Le dio gozo, se regocijó cuando lo vio. Le dio gusto ver al joven. He rejoiced, right, when he saw him, when he actually saw that he was there, looking back, trying to get his wife back. The father probably knew something was going on. El padre quizás sabía lo que estaba sucediendo. Y ahora ve que él está queriendo resolver el problema. Maybe he's trying to resolve the issue. So we can see the beauty in restoration here. Podemos ver la hermosura en la restauración. En que un hombre esté dispuesto a perdonar y buscar reconciliación en el man, seeking to reconcile and to forgive, right, and to get together back with his wife. So we can kind of understand why the father was happy. Podemos entender porque el padre estaba feliz. Este es un buen hombre para mi mujer. He's a good husband. He's a good man for my wife. I'm glad they're getting back together. Estoy feliz de que se están reconciliando. So el padre está contento de tenerlos ahí. The father is happy to have him around. He was so happy that we read he didn't want to let him go. Estaba feliz, regocijado de tener ahí a este hombre que no quería dejarlo ir. Él estaba agradado de lo que estaba sucediendo. He was pleased. Right, he said he stayed there, and then when the young man tries to leave, he said, just stay a little bit longer, quédate. Y empieza a hacer excusas para que el hombre se quede. He starts to make this kind of excuses. Hey, don't go so early, no te vayas tan temprano. Desayuna primero, just eat some breakfast. And they end up eating breakfast. Empiezan a comer desayuno. Y luego empiezan a tomar y beber y regocijarse. They begin to drink and rejoice. And they began to be married till it's really late. Y no es tarde. Y ya cuando es tarde, ¿sabes qué? Es muy tarde. No te vayas a ir. Hey, it's too late. Right? Don't leave. You know, have you ever visited family, and this is something that kind of happens? ¿Has visitado familia? ¿Te ha sucedido esto? Recuerdo la última vez que fue a ver a mi familia, a la esposa de mi familia. Last time I went to see my wife's family. And I don't think it was because of me they didn't want us to leave. Yo sé que no era por mí que no querían dejarnos ir. No querían dejar ir a su hija. They didn't want to let their daughter go. So we went and they kept telling her, you should stay longer. Se deben de quedar más tiempo. Porque estaban regocijados. They were rejoicing. My daughter's here, mi hija está aquí. So they kept trying to convince us, but we didn't stay, no nos quedamos, nos fuimos. So yo entiendo, creo que lo que estaba sucediendo, que I sort of understand. When I go with my family, something similar. Cuando voy con mi familia es algo muy similar. Mi familia es un poco más aferrada. My family's a little bit more stubborn. Right? They'll probably, do something to your car so it won't run, so you can stay. Ellos, mi familia, son de los que quizás te van a ponchar o hacer algo al carro para que no te vayas. Algo van a hacer. Hasta parece que oran por lluvias fuertes, or never they even pray for rain or snow, because sometimes things like that have happened with me and my family. So I kind of see this, the young man says, okay, I want to go where I have to go, I want to take my wife and get her con mi esposa. Pero no lo deja ahí, verso 5. Let's go to verse 5. Vamos a verso 5. El cuarto día, sucede lo mismo. The fourth day, the same thing happens. He holds them back again. Los sostiene otra vez. Y beben otra vez. They drink, and it's too late. You can't leave again. No se puede ir otra vez. Verso 6. Otra vez lo mismo. The same thing is going on. Now the fifth day comes. Llega el quinto día y intenta hacer lo mismo. He tries to do the same thing. But the Levite man doesn't let it happen. El joven, el levita no deja que esto suceda. Dice, no, esta vez sí me tengo que ir. This day I have to leave. I have to leave. And I'm going to stop here a little bit, because this story is one of the worst stories you'll probably read in the Bible. Una de las historias peores que pueden leer en la palabra de Dios. Porque a pesar de que hay algo bueno que estamos leyendo, que estaba sucediendo, el resto de la historia es algo muy triste. Even though what we're reading is sort of a good picture, the story turns around. Right? Everything turns to something ugly. And you read the story, and you kind of see the father, and it's as if the father is saying, I don't want my daughter to leave. I don't want her to leave. Just live here with me. And it would have been nice if he probably would have just stayed, maybe. Y entre más leemos la historia, podemos leer esta parte, podemos decir, bueno, es como, antes de leer la historia, ya cuando entiendes lo que sucede en el futuro, entonces le dices, es mejor que mi hija se hubiera quedado, que se quede aquí para siempre. Quizás las cosas hubieran estado mejor si se quedaran el yerno ahí, la esposa, y vivieran ahí juntos. Parece que fue un fin feliz, pero no era así. La ley, hermanos, era un poco drástica cuando había adulterio. The law was a little bit drastic when it came to adultery. And forgiveness was a big thing in those days. El perdón era algo muy grande, especialmente de un hombre judío, especially from a Jewish man. But, there was something different when it came to the tribe of Levi. There were different people. Pero había algo muy diferente cuando se trataba de los levitas. Los levitas eran personas, hombres diferentes al judío regular. Eran un poco más nobles. They were a little bit more noble. They even spoke different than most of the Jewish tribes. Ellos hablaban un poco diferente, tenían una forma de hablar. Quizás tenían un lenguaje más limpio. Maybe they have a pure or cleaner language. Maybe they didn't speak foul words. Maybe that was one of the things. Quizás ellos no hablaban en una forma ofensiva o usaban groserías cuando hablaban. Quizás eran hombres que hablaban un poco más limpio o educado. Y eran hombres diferentes. They were different sort of men. So we see that maybe that was still in existence, even though Israel was on their way down spiritually. Había algo bueno en algunos levitas a pesar de que Israel iba para abajo. So se van el quinto día. So they go on the fifth day. Finally he says, no, we have to leave. I know it's late. Yo sé que es tarde. Pero se van. llegan a una ciudad y a la tarde they reach a certain city. I'm trying to find my verse. Let's go to verse 12 and 13. The servant talks to the Levite, his master, el siervo de Levita habla con su señor y le dice, vamos a parar en esta ciudad. He tells him, hey, let's stop at this city. I think the name of the city was Jezreel, la ciudad de Jesús. And the master said, I don't want to stop here. He said, yo no quiero parar en esta ciudad, porque no son de nuestra familia, no son israelitas. They're not of our family, they're not of our tree, they're not Israelites. You know, they're Gentiles, son gentiles, o son jebusitas, they're Jebusites. So he didn't feel safe. Quizás no se sentía seguro de entrar a esa ciudad. So decide decirle no a su siervo, y el siervo le dice porque todavía había luz, there was still light, there was still daylight. They could still find a place, podían encontrar un lugar, pero dice, yo no me siento cómodo entrando en una ciudad donde no son familiares o no son israelitas, they're not Israelites. So let's go to the next city, vamos a la siguiente ciudad, que es Gabaa, which is Gibeah. Or in Ramah, this is a city that belongs to the tribe, let me see, the Benjamites. Esta es una tribu que es parte de la tribu de Benjamín. Y se vamos a esa ciudad. ¿Y qué sucede cuando entran a esa ciudad? Ya es tarde, ya es noche, it's already late, and it's dark. And, you know, this is something that if you study this you're always going to hear this. Siempre vas a escuchar esto. En esos tiempos no había hoteles. In those days there wasn't hotels or motels o moteles, sino la costumbre era que las personas de ese pueblo te invitaban a quedarte en su casa. It was the custom of those days that you were passing by, that most people would, the custom was that you would invite those people into your house. They even had rooms for that. Tenían cuartos para eso. So eso es la costumbre. So, este levita entra a la ciudad donde está casi seguro que lo van a recibir, where he might be a little bit sure that they're going to receive him. You know, especially because he was a Levite, quizás especialmente porque era un levita. Pero ¿qué sucede, hermanos? What happens? They enter the city, it's dark, already late, ya es oscuro, ya es noche, y las personas lo ven, people see them, and they do not invite them in anywhere. No los invitan nadie. Si fuera un levita, hermano, lo deberían de recibir. If he was a Levite, they should have received him, especially if he was a priest, which is probably he was a priest. Quizás si era un sacerdote. Pero en que la mayoría del pueblo, las personas de ese pueblo, hermanos, no le abrieron puertas, no le invitaron. The people that were from that city, from the tribe of Benjamin, the Jebusites, didn't invite him in anywhere. The question is why? La cuestión es por qué no. Era un levita, quizás también era un sacerdote, he was a Levite, maybe a high priest. You know, this kind of reminds me of, you know, I remember when I used to knock doors in a city called Center, una ciudad que se llamaba Center, Texas. And for some reason, you know, they already knew me. A lot of those people already knew me. I was a missionary, era un misionero. Y unos de ellos, cuando me miraban pasar, escondían su cerveza. Many of them, when they would see me walking, because they already had a relationship with me, a friendship. So they would try to hide their beer. Trataban de esconder su cerveza. Yo les decía, ¿para qué lo esconde? Ya sé lo que está pasando y eso no me va a afectar a mí. So I know what's going on. It's not going to offend me. No, I just want some of your time. Y no más quiero su tiempo. Quizás era algo similar con este pueblo. Maybe it was something similar. But what I get from this, lo que yo recibo de aquí es que ellos estaban muy mal. They were so bad. They were so far from the customs, from the things they grew up. Estamos tan lejos de sus costumbres. Estamos tan lejos de Dios. They were so far from the customs. They were so far from God. Right? They didn't have the love and the compassion to invite a Levite into their house. No tenían el amor y la compasión. Estaban tan mal con Dios que no tenían amor y compasión de invitar a un levita, hermanos, a su casa. A alguien que quizás era ministro de esa medida, probably was a minister to them. Right, somebody that would probably minister for them in the tabernacle, alguien que quizás ministraba por ellos en el tabernáculo, quizás lo representaba en cierta forma. He would represent them in a form in the tabernacle. Yet, no offers. Nadie lo ofreció. So ahí podemos ver también el estado del estado de Israel. We see a picture of where Israel was. But then what happens? ¿Qué sucede? Dice un anciano de Ephraim, an old man from Ephraim, right? Meaning he was from the same city where this Levite was going to. Él era de la misma ciudad de donde iba este levita. So quizás de alguna manera reconoció, somos de la misma ciudad. Somehow he realized, hey, we're of the same town. Well, we're from Ephraim, somos de Efraín. Dice, este hombre que no es de esta ciudad, this one that is not from there, right, he invites him, él nos invita. ¿Y qué sucede, hermanos? Vamos al verso 18, let's go to verse 18. He's asking, where are you from? Les pregunta de son. Dice, y él respondió, pasamos de Belén de Judá a la parte hermosa del monte de Efraín, de donde soy. Y había ido a Belén de Judá, mas ahora voy a la casa de Jehová, y no hay quien me reciba en casa. And he said unto him, we are passing from Bethlehem, Judah, toward the side of Mount Ephraim, from thence I am, and I went to Bethlehem, Judah, but I am now going to the house of the Lord, and there is no man that receiveth me to the house. 19, verse 19. Nosotros tenemos paja y forraje para nuestros asnos. Y también tenemos pan y vino para mí y para tu sierva y para el criado que está con tu siervo, y no nos hace falta nada. Yet there's both straw and a provender, right, for our donkeys, and there's bread and wine also for me and for thy handmaid and for the young man which is thy servant. There is no want of anything. So what is he saying? ¿Qué es lo que está diciendo él? No vamos a hacer molestia. We're not going to be a burden. You don't have to be so worried. Just give us a place to rest. Danos un lugar de descansar. Tenemos comida. Tenemos pan. We have food. We have bread. We have things even to share with you. Tenemos cosas hasta para compartir contigo. Aquí miramos que era una persona que no quería hacer una molestia. Ya se estaba sintiendo quizás como una molestia por cómo lo recibieron. Maybe he already felt like a burden because they wouldn't receive him. But then, when somebody receives it, he says, hey, I have everything. Don't worry about my food. I have food. I just want to rest. Quiero descansar. Estoy viajando. I'm traveling. Y el hombre anciano dijo, paz sea contigo. Tu necesidad toda queda solamente a mi cargo, con tal que no pase la noche en la plaza. And the old man said, peace be with thee. Howsoever let all thy wants lie upon me, only lodge not in the street. So here we see this man, he cared. Este anciano realmente le importó. Él quería ayudar. Y bueno, le dice, no te preocupes. Tú guardas tus cosas. Yo te voy a dar de comer. Yo te voy a dar lo que necesitas. He says, don't worry about what you have. The old man says, I will give you what you need. I'll feed you. My concern is, mi preocupación es que yo no quiero que estés aquí en la noche sola. I don't want you to be here alone at night. So here we began to see some signs. Miramos ya las señales. Este señor sabía que era un peligro que esta familia, esta pareja estuviera fuera en esta ciudad. He knew that it was a dangerous city. He said, I don't want you to be here at night. Especially, you're a Levite, eres un levita. Y estás pasando por aquí. I know what's going on. So estamos tratando de protegerlos. So he's trying to protect them. So he brings them to his house. Los trae a su casa. So they were there, verse 22, gozaron, so they were rejoicing, right? They were happy, estaban felices, encontraron un lugar donde descansar. They found a place to rest, and they're with the person that is from the same city, están con una persona en la misma ciudad, so están como they are comfortable. But then what happens? ¿Qué sucede? Llega alguien casi aventando la puerta. Here comes somebody almost tearing down the door, right? Hitting the door, banging the door, golpeando la puerta. Y aquí es donde todo empieza a cambiar. This is where everything begins to change. Right here we hear of some Sodomites. Miramos unos sodomitas de esta tribu donde estaban de Benjamín, from the tribe of Benjamin, the Sodomites. Right, let us in, déjanos entrar, danos a ese hombre. Queremos conocer a este hombre. We want to know this man. We know what this means. Queremos conocer a este hombre. No están hablando de platicar con él. We know he's not talking about talking with them. He's talking about a Sodomite way of sin. Eran sodomitas. Y le dice el anciano, the man says, hey, leave this man alone. Deja a este hombre en paz. Y la costumbre judía, hermanos, era peor que un hombre tuviera relaciones con un hombre, que viceversa. It was worse for a man to have a relationship with another man. So they give this, they respond this way, responde de esta manera, dicen, no, por favor deja a este hombre en paz. Este anciano sabía que no iban a dejar de tocar y causar problemas. He knew they weren't going to stop and causing problems. We don't know how many people they were, no sabemos cuántas personas eran, pero quizás les hubiera costado la vida. Maybe it would have cost their life if they were to turn to fight back. So what do? The man says, I'll give you my daughter, yo a mi hija, que es una virgen, and she's a virgin, or the concubine, or concubina. So they throw the concubine, right, and give them to these men, and tiran a la concubina, que es la esposa de este levita. She's the wife of this Levite. Verse 24, verso 24, aquí mi hija virgen y la concubina del yo os la sacaré ahora, humilladla y haced con ella como os parezca, y no hagas a este hombre cosa tan infame. Behold, here is my daughter, a maiden, and his concubine, them I will bring out now, and humble ye them, and with them what seemeth good unto you, but unto this man do not so vile a thing. The rest of the story is sad. Lo que sigue es algo triste. La violan, they rape this woman. From night to the morning, de la noche hasta la mañana, al último la avientan, they throw her. She goes to the step of the door, va al escalón de la puerta. Abren la puerta, they open the door. I think it was the Levite, el Levita. Mira a la mujer tirada, she sees her on the floor. He calls her, get up, le dice, levántate. La mujer no responde, she doesn't get up. She was probably already dead, quizás ya estaba muerta. La sube en su asno, he puts her on his donkey. He gets home, él llega a su casa. ¿Puede imaginar lo que está sintiendo este hombre? Can you imagine what he's going through? Can you imagine the anger and fury he's feeling, el coraje y la furia que él está sintiendo? Ya está muerta su mujer, his wife is dead. And think about what they did to her. Piensen en lo que le hicieron a esta mujer. So llega a su casa y ¿qué es lo que hace con el coraje? What does he do with the fury that he has in him? Yeah. He's mad. And he's furious against the tribe of Benjamin. Él está furioso, está enojado con la tribu de Benjamín. Él no puede luchar en contra de una tribu él solo. He cannot fight against a tribe by himself, a whole tribe. So he gets his wife, right, the body, agarra el cuerpo y lo corta en 12 partes. He cuts the body of this woman in 12 pieces. But he wants every tribe to know what the Benjamites did. Pero él quiere que todas las tribus de Benjamín sepan lo que estos benjamitas fueron capaces de hacer. ¿Qué tipos de personas eran los benjamitas? He wants the tribes of Israel to know what sort of people are the Benjamites. How terrible these people are. Qué terribles son estas personas. So va y deja un pedazo del cuerpo de esta mujer a cada tribu con un mensaje. He leaves a body part to every tribe with a message so that they know, look what these Benjamites did. Miren lo que hicieron estos benjamitas. Verso 30, verso 30. Todo el que veía aquello decía, jamás se ha hecho ni visto tal cosa. Desde el tiempo en que los hijos de Israel subieron de la tierra de Egipto hasta hoy, considerar, pensar, meditar en esto, tomar consejo y hablar. And it was so that all that saw it said there was no such deed done, not seen from the day that the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt unto this day. Consider of it, think about it, pay attention, be thoughtful of this, take advice, and speak your mind. How are you going to respond? He's asking, how are you going to respond to this? ¿Cómo van a responder? Esta es la cosa más horrible que ha visto Israel desde que salió de Egipto. This is the worst, the most terrible thing that Israel has seen since they got out of Egypt. Respond to this. Respondan a esto. La conclusión aquí es, hermanos, esto realmente es físicamente, lo que podemos ver esto físicamente, the physical thing that we see here, the horror that we see here, el horror que vemos aquí, es la imagen físico de lo que estaba sucediendo espiritualmente en Israel. This is the physical appearance of what was going on spiritually with Israel. That's how terrible it was. Así de terrible esto era. Hermanos, la vida sin Dios es una vida horrible. Life without God is a horrible life. It's a terrible life. Es una vida terrible. Es una vida dolorosa. Es una vida cruel. It's a painful life. It's a cruel way of living. See, they weren't able to acknowledge this. The Benjamites, los benjamitas no vieron esto. Para ellos estaba bien lo que ellos hicieron. To them it was okay. But speaking spiritually, it was not okay. Hablando espiritualmente, esto no estaba bien. Estaban severamente enfermos. They were severely sick. And this is the whole nation of Israel. Esta es toda la nación de Israel. Porque permitieron el pecado. They allowed sin. See, and things began to happen when sin comes into a nation or a family, cuando el pecado entra en una nación, a una familia, cuando entra el adulterio espiritual, when spiritual adultery comes in, this sort of things begin to happen. Right? God allowed this, Dios permitió esto. Esto realmente, podemos decir, era Dios se quitó del retrato. God got out of the picture. Right? And he was letting them destroy themselves. En cierta forma estaba dejando que se destruyan. Para quizás esto los haga volver. Hopefully this will cause them to turn back to God. I'm going to try to be really quick. Let's go to Hosea chapter 5. Vamos a Hoseas capítulo 5. O saben que, hermanos, vamos a parar. I will stop there. We'll continue on Hosea chapter 5 and Leviticus chapter 20 next. Y vamos a continuar en Levíticos 20 las semanas que vienen. Igual leer Hosea capítulo 5 y ahí aplicamos más el siguiente. We'll apply the next point. May the Lord bless His word. Que Dios bendiga su palabra, hermanos. Gracias por su atención. Thank you for your attention. Let's stand. Vamos a ponernos de pie. Están invitados al servicio de la tarde. You're invited to the evening service. Vamos a inclinar nuestros rostros. O si alguien, hermanos, quiere la oportunidad, si alguien nos quiere despedir en oración, no tiene el deseo. Amén, hermano. Amén.
Como dice el Padre Celestial, Señor, gracias por la oportunidad, Señor, por la bendición, que nos bendiga, Señor, y que este estudio que vimos, Señor, que sabemos que cualquiéramos y todos, Señor, que nos quedamos aquí, Señor, que está siempre con nosotros, Señor, pido que nos bendiga, que vamos a ver tu palabra y estudiarla más, Señor, pido que nos perdones que no hacemos eso, que fallamos, Señor, pido que bendigas a hermanos que están aquí, también los que no pueden venir, que quieran que siempre tú los ayudes y los perdones que nos conecten también, Señor, pido que nos bendigas y vamos a seguir adelante con nuestras faltas y gracias, Señor, por tu salvador, Señor.
Amen. Saludos en amor cristiano, greeting church personal.